Joe Biden has in a sense been the Democratic primary frontrunner even before he officially became a candidate. Bolstered by strong name recognition and close ties to a popular former president, Barrack Obama, Biden led the Democratic field in most polls before declaring, and since then, he's been surging. But there are good reasons to suspect that these immediate surges might be followed by a tumble in the long run. I laid out some of the reasons for this some months ago in my 5 Problems for Joe Biden video. Apparently, Joe ignored my warnings. So in this video, I'll lay out another 10 reasons why I do not believe his chances for securing the Democratic nomination are quite as good as they may appear. Of course, this doesn't mean that Biden's chances are terrible either. No matter how you slice it, Biden has the best poll numbers. He has the support of the establishment. He raised more money in his first 24 hours than any other candidate, and he's one of the most popular politicians in the country, with a positive net favorability around the high teens. With all that on his side, it's not unreasonable to ask, what could stop him? If you are a supporter of anyone other than Joe Biden for the 2020 Democratic primary, the polls are quite discouraging. After announcing, he's surged in the polls, and while these polls may not all be perfectly constructed, it's a dangerous signal for his competitors in the primary race. But his recent surging won't necessarily convert into a primary victory. There was another centrist politician, high on charisma but low on policy, who entered into the race late despite plenty of hype. Of course, I'm talking about Beto O'Rourke. In mid-March, prior to his announcement, he was polling around 5.5%. He shot up sharply after the announcement, peaking at nearly double, 9.5%. The excitement gradually died down, and Beto is currently polling at 4.4%, behind 5 other candidates. With Biden, we could be looking at the same thing. A big surge of excitement raising his numbers after his announcement, followed by a gradual slippage over time. But the fact that this pattern is precedented does not mean that it's necessary. It happened to Beto, but Biden may be another beast. Polling gives us some indication of what is possible, but to know whether Biden's numbers can hold, we have to look into numerous factors behind the polls. One negative signal for Biden is the fact that the Democratic political establishment does not seem as excited about him as he might hope. Make no mistake about it, Democratic insiders have been scurrying to find a way to repeat the role they played in the 2016 Democratic primary, preventing the nomination of Bernie Sanders. The New York Times reported, "The matter of what to do about Bernie and the larger imperative of party unity has, for example, hovered over a series of previously undisclosed Democratic dinners in New York and Washington, organized by the longtime party financier Bernard Schwartz. The gatherings have included scores from the moderate or center-left wing of the party, including Speaker Nancy Pelosi of California, Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, the minority leader, former Governor Terry McAuliffe of Virginia, Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Bend, Indiana, himself a presidential candidate, and the president of Center for American Progress, Neera Tanden." So while the increasingly popular but still relatively minor candidate, Pete Buttigieg, has been present at these dinners, apparently Biden has been left out of the loop. Mayor Pete certainly seems like a capable politician, but why would Democratic insiders not be speaking with their most recognizable candidate instead? Joe Biden is very much an establishment Democrat, running on a promise of a return to normal. He's calling himself an Obama-Biden Democrat. But even Biden's old pal Barack Obama had actually helped to talk him out of a run in 2016, as Obama preferred Clinton as his successor. Today, despite the fact that Obama has not endorsed his vice president, outlets like CNN are considering it a win that he didn't talk him out of the endeavor, with headlines like "Obama's not endorsing, but he didn't talk Biden out of running in 2020. Not talking him out of a run is hardly a win for the most recognizable face in the primary. Still, Biden did get a win from some of the establishment financiers. Biden, who was concerned about how his first day haul would stack up against Beto or Bernie, managed to top both, reporting $6.3 million raised in the first 24 hours. He accomplished this with 96,929 individual contributors, less than a third of Bernie's count of 360,000. Translation, he likely got a significant top-up from the super rich. There were enough wealthy Democrats to come through for him to take the day one money record, despite only having a third as many donors. By the way, that's a point in itself. Bernie has 3 times as many donors. Still, excitement from the wealthy donor class did not seem to be universal. While Obama's former funders were no doubt helpful in aiding Biden's first-day haul figures, many of Biden's natural financial backers seem a bit standoffish. Even pro-establishment publication Politico revealed trepidation in some of the quotes they gathered. Bill Ecko said, "I like Joe Biden, of course. I think he's a great guy. He's on the old side, but he's not too old to do the job. I'm waiting to learn more about the candidates before making a decision." Bill Stetson told Politico back in March, "We're very close to Joe Biden and we don't know what he's doing, and I like Beto, and I think a woman should be in the mix. We have to think about the very big picture, and we need to heal this country right now." Of course, establishment money and support from fellow establishment politicians isn't everything. It's a lot for Biden, but it isn't everything. Support for Biden in the establishment press appears to be quite strong. While I give CNN's Chris Cillizza some credit for creating a video called Joe Biden's Big 2020 Problem.
And this is one of those cases where the deeper you dig, the more hurdles you see for Biden's march to the nomination. Mixed metaphor alert.
After Biden's launch, he penned an article called Joe Biden's Past 24 Hours Could Not Have Gone More Perfectly, which, as you may expect, avoids mentioning any of Biden's issues, even minor ones, like the fact that he failed to secure as many donors as Bernie Sanders. CNN also spilled plenty of ink over a poll they conducted, which found Biden's spread over Bernie to be somewhat surprisingly high. The methodology was fairly questionable, with younger voters sampled at a statistically insignificant rate. Don't get me wrong, in an era where polls are very often criticized as being useless, I think data does tell a story. And there have been better polls conducted confirming similar information to what CNN's poll indicated. At the same time, if you aren't polling sufficient young people, your data is useless. Certainly a poll like this tells us less about the actual viability of the candidate than the number of donors actually supporting a candidate with money. Biden's had a lead in the polls for nearly every poll conducted. I do think he has a lead over Bernie that shouldn't be underestimated. Still, the fact that Bernie has a larger number of donors is incredibly predictive information in my view. But put that aside, the fact that CNN puts so much energy behind a methodologically flawed poll is indicative to me that the establishment press is pulling for Biden. So while the money might be hedging, the media isn't really. At least not the mainstream media. When it comes to online media, that's a different story altogether. Plenty of progressive YouTubers and Twitter users were quick to note the methodology issues in that poll I just talked about, and the online space has been able to drudge up some of Biden's unfortunate past. It's very clear that Joe Biden's past is coming back to haunt him. One example was the video of him praising Dick Cheney.
I actually like Dick Cheney for real. I get on with him. I think he's a decent man.
The sentiment he expressed here is particularly damaging, as voters will likely realize that he hasn't much changed, as evidenced, for example, by the positive words he had for the current far-right Republican vice president.
It was followed on by a guy who's a decent guy, our vice president.
This is only one recent example of Biden's old clips that could be drudged up.
And so the younger generation now tells me how tough things are. Give me a break. No. I have no empathy for it. Give me a break.
Progressive and conservative independent media is likely to continue to dig up all that they can. And Biden has a long record, one that won't necessarily track well with Democrats looking for a real progressive, with a strong progressive message. He supported the repeal of Glass-Steagall, the Iraq War, the 1994 crime bill, and numerous unpopular trade deals, just to name a few examples. This record is especially problematic considering Biden has labeled himself the most progressive person in the field.
I have the most progressive record of anybody running for if anybody who would run.
But it's not just his conciliatory attitude towards right-wingers or his relatively conservative record. He also has a problematic relationship with identity politics-related issues, which matter more in the center lane. There's the troublesome video of Biden at the Anita Hill hearings, clearly arguing that his colleagues have every right to question her aggressively.
It is appropriate to ask Professor Hill anything any member wishes to ask her. to plumb the depths of her credibility.
Anita Hill is a serious issue, considering especially that she doesn't appear to forgive him, not after it took a presidential run for him to finally apologize. The Anita Hill problem is a double hit for Biden, as it emphasizes other issues he has with women and with people of color. Biden already has a seriously problematic history with black people. He argued against busing to integrate schools. In other words, he was on the wrong side of history when it comes to segregation. Meanwhile, his biggest primary opponent actually participated in the civil rights movement, fighting for integration in the University of Chicago's school housing. As deeply as that problem cuts, Biden's history with women, another issue relating to Anita Hill, is potentially even more explosive. Lucy Flores was the first to break the dam on Joe Biden's inappropriate touching in her piece in New York Magazine describing a 2014 encounter in which he kissed the back of her head and smelled her hair just before she was about to go on stage at a campaign event. Prior to the Flores essay, plenty online noticed the creepy Uncle Joe thing, an issue I discussed at length in my 5 Problems video on Joe Biden. One of the most famous pieces of creepy Joe Biden material was footage of him whispering into the ear of Stephanie Carter, who has since leapt to his defense. But numerous women have spoken out since Flores refused to accept Joe's inappropriate touching. Amy Lapo spoke out to say he leaned in on her for what she thought was an attempt to kiss her before rubbing his nose against hers. Still technically a kiss, I believe. I think they call that an Inuit kiss. DJ Hill came out saying that Biden rubbed up and down her back when she was taking a picture with him and her husband in 2012. Caitlin Caruso talked about having to deal with Biden putting his hand on her thigh when she was a 19-year-old college student and sexual assault survivor. He did so at a campus event about sexual assault. These are just 4 cases. With the number of inappropriate touches we've all seen in front of cameras, many more stories of discomfort are likely out there waiting to be told.
Nothing to see here, right? Wrong, because the vice president wouldn't unhand Hillary for almost 16 seconds.
Sure, Biden's apologized.
Social norms have begun to change, they've shifted, and the boundaries of protecting personal space have been reset. And I get it. I get it. I hear what they're saying. I understand it. And I'll be much more mindful. That's my responsibility.
But while I haven't seen much coverage of this issue since Biden declared his candidacy, this may continue to be a problem lying in wait. More stories would hurt him. But even if more don't come out, what's already out there gives Trump a distinct advantage in general, as the president control him. Now let's not forget how Trump managed to turn his own issues in similar areas around on Hillary Clinton in 2016, somehow managing to turn a news cycle about the infamous Trump tapes into a debate over Bill Clinton's gruesome history. I predicted several months ago that Trump would likely use the creepy Joe thing as part of his campaign strategy. Indeed, I was right, as Trump even managed to turn Biden's apology video into further messaging about his creepiness. I think we should all admit that, immature as that was, it's a demonstration of masterful trolling. I would also be remiss in my duties if I didn't point out that 23 women have accused Donald Trump of sexual misconduct. But that's just the point. Another Democrat might easily attack Trump on these issues, and Trump would have little to respond with. With Joe Biden, Trump can make it a wash, possibly even a win. Here's another thing Trump's got a win on. While Trump has been critical of the Bush administration and the war in Iraq, Joe Biden bragged about drafting the Patriot Act. Biden has supported plenty of conservative policies, many of which I've already named in this video. But more than just supporting bad bills, or pushing for them, or drafting them, he's bragged on numerous occasions about drafting the basis of the Patriot Act. The New Republic quoted him as saying, "I drafted a terrorism bill after the Oklahoma City bombing, and the bill John Ashcroft sent up was my bill." That bill being, of course, the Patriot Act. On Meet the Press the same year, he said, "I introduced the terrorism bill in '94 that had a lot of these things in it." On yet another occasion, Biden bragged that John Ashcroft actually admitted that it was his bill, boasting, "I got a call when Ashcroft introduced the Patriot Act. He said, 'Joe, I'm introducing the act basically as you wrote it in 1994. Having so frequently bragged about it, Biden has positioned himself as a chief architect of Bush-era policies, as he engages in a policy-focused primary contest for the nomination of an increasingly progressive Democratic Party. Speaking of policy, let's talk about Biden's campaign launch.
Their crazed faces, illuminated by torches, veins bulging.
Biden's campaign launch video struck emotional chords, with references to Charlottesville and repeating words about the soul of America.
He will forever and fundamentally alter the character of this nation. Some very fine people on both sides. I wrote at the time that we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. Very fine people on both sides? Well, that's even more true today. We are in the battle for the soul of this nation. Who we are, the core values of this nation. Everything that has made America, America is at stake. That's what we believe. And above all else, that's what's at stake in this election. Even more important, we have to remember who we are. This is America.
What it clearly lacked was even a single campaign policy. Biden's website does, however, mention policy. However, compared to progressive policy wonks like Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, Biden is absurdly vague. Take, for instance, his first specific issue laid out: restoring the basic bargain for American workers. The American middle class built this country, yet today CEOs in Wall Street are putting profits over workers, plain and simple. It's wrong. There used to be a basic bargain in this country that when you work hard, you were able to share in the prosperity your work helped to create. It's time to restore the dignity of work and give workers back the power to earn what they're worth. These are fine words. He accurately diagnoses a problem and a general goal to achieve. But both Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump could say the exact same thing. Biden appears to be trying to avoid being controversial in his policy statements. That's a nice idea, since it would avoid alienating people. The problem is, it avoids exciting people too. He's not making a stand. There are no specifics, just talk. These words don't hold his feet to the fire in the least. And much of his policy statements follow this pattern. Identify a problem, paint a general picture of what would be better, but totally avoid any specific plans to achieve those goals. Oddly, Biden is much more specific on at least one policy issue: ending big money in politics. Again, his website's policy section says, wealthy special interest corporations and foreign influences are skewing the policy process in Washington in their own favor by taking advantage of the way we finance elections. We need to create a public financing system for federal campaigns and pass a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, to amplify the voices of individual Americans and ensure elected officials are working for the people. In the meantime, the public has the right to know who is contributing to which advertisements and campaign initiatives. Here he actually spells out a specific plan to end money in politics with a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. There's only two problems here. One, it's hard to take him seriously considering how he is currently courting large donors for his campaign. His first campaign stop was in fact a fundraiser filled with corporate lobbyists and GOP donors. Second, perhaps conveniently, a constitutional amendment to end money in politics can only really come from two places: the states calling for a convention or Congress. Biden doesn't specify either or how he would bring either about. In fact, it's unclear how an executive action by the president could possibly tackle this problem. The best a president could do is use his or her bully pulpit to pressure the Congress to move on the issue. Considering Biden's close ties with big money and the fact that this is literally the last policy mentioned on his website, I have my doubts that he'd fight tooth and nail to make this essential change. At the end of the day, Biden seems in every way to be a candidate who represents a return to normal. As vice president to Obama, he was next in line for the Democratic succession. As a centrist establishment type, he feels like a compromise choice for liberals and conservatives. He tends towards civility and maintaining normal order, rather than rocking the boat or promising radical change. He's polite and affable and overly affectionate. For those who consider the Trump administration to be a shocking departure from an otherwise excellent American political environment,
we are in the battle for the soul of this nation.
Biden would be the perfect choice. But in my view, "I'm not Trump" is not a winning message. A return to normal does not address the social and economic problems in America that brought Trump about in the first place.
The oranges, how it started.
It does not address the damage done by disastrous trade deals, regime change wars, and radical inequality in the American economy. While Build the Wall may have been a foolhardy call that was never fulfilled, and would have accomplished nothing even if it was, fear of illegal immigrants is not likely to gain traction when ordinary Americans feel that they have good wages and job security.
I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges.
While Trump very much filled his cabinet and his White House with political and economic insiders, his call to drain the swamp could only have gained favor from a populace that is fed up with a corrupt political establishment. In my view, Trump can only be defeated by a Democratic candidate who successfully articulates solutions to the problems that ushered the Trump era into existence.
The oranges of the
and establishes themselves as a credible champion of those solutions. Biden certainly has some advantages that Clinton did not have in 2016. He's far more popular, and he is empowered by the knowledge that the Rust Belt is by no means an impenetrable blue wall. But Trump, too, is stronger than he was in 2016. His favorability is higher, and as an incumbent, his credibility, too, is significantly higher. So Democratic voters and the party itself must, in this primary process, look beyond into the general, take Trump seriously, and ask, what could stop him?
I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation, the beginnings of that investigation. I wish covered the oranges, how it started.